Hi friends, it's Sarah Joy. I want to share with you things that I've learned when painting my own cabinetry. And if you're thinking about taking on a bathroom or a kitchen in your future, I want to share with you what I've learned, and it really is a very doable process that I think you can master pretty easily inside your own home. So first of all, I want to start out by saying that I am not a painting expert, and I did my own research online and by asking some other people before I started to get into it. So I will go ahead and link a video in the description that I think I watched and referenced a few times when taking this project on, but I will share with you the steps that I took and then the things that I learned along the way when painting my cabinets. Now, you might know I did do both my bathroom cabinets in both bathrooms and the kitchen cabinets, and I am pleased with the result. I do think they turned out great. It's been probably over half a year since I've done them, and they have held up perfectly. There's not scratching or anything going on there, so I am definitely very pleased with the results, and I think they turned out really well. Let's go over a list of the things that you need first. The first thing that you'll need is something called trisodium phosphate, and this is what you'll use to clean and prime your cabinet. The second thing that you'll need is two different kinds of sandpaper. So one that's about 180 grit, and then the other one that's a really fine grit that's about 220 grit sandpaper. The next thing that you'll need is tack cloth, and this will be used to clean up the things that you've sanded. You'll also need primer. I used an oil-based Kills primer for all the cabinetry. You'll also need paint supplies. Go figure. I used an angled brush, a roller brush that had a little bit of pile on it, and also a paint sprayer. You'll need painter's tape and a marker, and then last but not least, paint. I used, and I think this is probably my main tip, Sherwin Williams Emerald Urethane paint. Now that you have that list of everything that we're going to be using, let me take you through the steps. As you're getting started with painting your cabinets, do not try to do all of these steps with the cabinets still attached. Go ahead and unscrew all of them and lay them out on a big work surface. And you want to take all the hinges off, all the hardware off, and then be able to paint and prime accordingly. All right, so step one, especially if you're working in the kitchen, is to scrub all of the existing cabinets down with the trisodium phosphate. This is gonna remove any type of grease or buildup that's on there. So first of all, obviously you wanna remove any dust. And then the second thing is if there are any areas that you would constantly reach for, maybe your cabinets don't currently have hardware on them, so you're always reaching with your hand, or maybe these are the ones in your kitchen that are located really close to the stovetop. You want to especially take your time with these and make sure that you give them a full scrub, because if all of the grease and oil is not properly cleaned off of them, then your paint will not adhere correctly. So you really want to take your time with this step, maybe do it a couple times to make sure that your cabinets are really cleaned and prepped before you get started. Okay, so step two is to rough up the surface that you're going to be using with the medium grit sandpaper. And this is to just give the primer something to hold on to. Now, I didn't go into my cabinet painting process with with a really poor paint job that was already done on it that I was trying to get through. So I'm not really sure if you have to go in and strip the cabinets before starting over again. But if you're working with an engineered wood or a hardwood cabinet, then just sand it enough to give it some texture so that the primer can adhere to it. The next step is to go in with the tack cloth. So this is kind of a sticky cheesecloth. You're gonna go in and remove all the sawdust and all of the little particles that have been on there, because you don't want any of those to show up when you start painting, trust me. And you'll see a lot of these collect in the corners, so just make sure to be really detailed when you're going through there and kind of brush them out, maybe with a little fine toothbrush or something to get them out, and then wipe it all up with the tack cloth so that your surface is prepared for paint. The next step is to start priming your cabinets. I think I did at least 2 coats of primer, maybe 3. I wanted it to look very, very solid. I didn't want to look and see streaky primer, and I mean that in 2 ways. One, you don't want to see through your primer into the original surface, so you want to make sure that it's a really thick not translucent at all, white primer. And the second thing is you want to make sure that whatever you're using, I would suggest that you use a roller when you're doing this, just because I feel like that gives it like the easiest texture. If you're using brush, I would just be really careful that it's not leaving brush marks. Go to your local hardware store or your paint shop and ask them which brush does the best with that kind of paint or primer, so that you don't get into trouble with it leaving a bunch of brush strokes, because that's just going to be more work for you later on. I didn't trust primer to go inside of my spray gun because I thought it would be really thick and I didn't want to clog it up, so I did not go that route, but I know plenty of people do use the more industrial types of spray guns to spray primer, so you can look into that if that's something that you're using. I'm not the best person to ask on that one. So once you've gotten a really thick coat or 2 or 3 of primer on, then you're gonna go in and do the hardest part, in my opinion, and that is sanding it all down with the fine grit sandpaper. So this is the 220 grit sandpaper, and you're gonna go in and sand the daylights out of it. And as a best rule of thumb, I kept running my hand across it to see if I could feel any kind of texture. Because if you have any kind of texture that you can feel with your hand, you're going to see that once you start painting your cabinets. So you really want to do a super thorough job with all of this. So sand, sand, and sand again, and then go ahead and go back in with your tack cloth and remove all of that dust one more time. Now that you are cleaned, primed, sanded some more, and cleaned again, now it's time to paint. And so this is where I jumped in with my spray gun. I heard someone say once that when they're taking on a DIY project themselves, they think about how much money they're gonna be saving to do the project themselves. And then they realize with all that money that they're saving, they can invest a little bit in the right tools to help them do that project. So I thought about that when it came to doing the cabinets. I think I got a quote for the cabinets. It's several $1,000s. If you're gonna get a quote for somebody to come in and spray your cabinets, it's usually a few $1,000s. I'll just say that. It definitely is gonna depend on the square footage or how many cabinets that you're doing, but it is a pricey project. So investing in a $50 sprayer was not a hard decision to make if it was gonna really alleviate things and help the cabinets still look like a high quality. So I went ahead and I bought a paint sprayer on Amazon. I will put the link in the description if you wanna check that one out. I don't really have any complaints with it other than when I've been spraying for a while, it does start to get hot, so I kind of just give it a little minute to rest and cool off before I start spraying again. So at the advice of one of my friends, I went ahead and crafted, this is really easy, I just took a little piece of wood and then nailed a really small nail through it. This is about 1.5 inches by another inch. I used probably about 3 to 4 of these for each cabinet. And so basically I would just lay the cabinet down in the garage and they're held up by these 4 nails essentially, if you can see that. So just imagine them. I'll attach a video of what it looked like when I was about to paint everything, but I would lay them all down. And I started with them face down because if I made any mistakes when I was first spraying, I want it to happen on the back side rather than the front side. But the cool thing about this is, number one, if you're painting something, you don't do it directly on the surface, like the plastic surface that you're painting on, so you don't have the paint dripping down, attaching and fusing to the floor, and then it being a mess when you have to turn it over. So that alleviates that problem. And then, since you just have it being held up by these tiny little prongs, you can quickly take the cabinet, flip it over on the wet side, and place it back down and spray the front. So you can spray both sides in one swoop. And the 3 little dots, or the 3 to 4 little dots, will only show on the back side of the cabinet. I personally can't even find them, so they will go away with time. I think I gave it about a day in between each spray because I wanted the paint to fully settle out and level. The type of paint that I got takes time to fully level out. It's a self-leveling paint, so over a few hours, it's gonna kind of perfect itself on the surface that you're working on. So that's another reason why I chose this type of paint. It definitely is a very smart paint. It is more expensive. I wanna say it was a little over $100 a gallon, I think. I don't know, I might be making that up, but I barely used over a gallon in my entire kitchen, which was crazy, but I figured I was gonna use that color in the guest bathroom and maybe for some other projects, so I just got 2 gallons of it. I also want to mention that the paint itself is not oil-based. This paint is really awesome because it acts a lot like an oil-based paint, but it is a urethane-based paint, which is essentially more like a water-based paint. It's not latex. It makes for a really easy cleanup, and it's largely odor-free, which is really great when you're taking on the project yourself, working from home, you know, having to live in the same space that you're working in. All of those things make it a much more feasible thing to work with. Plus, not to mention like the cleanup of all your brushes and equipment, you're able to just rinse them out, which makes it way, way, way easier. So I definitely recommend this paint. I love it, have had a great experience with it, and I think that you should buy it for sure. I would give each coat of paint like a day to fully cure and dry before I went in with the second coat. I can't really remember if I did 3 coats or 4 coats, but I basically just kept going in with it just as often as I would see any kind of difference in texture on the front. Maybe like sometimes it would be a little bit lighter in one area, or if I saw any missed spots, I would just go in again another day. But I let those fully dry before moving them in. And then when it came to the cabinet boxes that were inside, I didn't feel like taping off everything to prevent overspray. So I went ahead and just rolled all of the cabinet boxes with a paint roller that has a little bit of pile on it, and that worked just fine. So I just went in with a little bit of painter's tape and an edger brush like on the baseboards and stuff. And then just for the cabinet boxes, yeah, just rolled them, and they turned out super smooth, so no complaints about that method. I did have a question for a friend of mine because our cabinets did not previously have hardware attached. So I asked, should I drill the holes before I start painting, or should I drill the holes for the hardware afterward? And their recommendation to me is to wait till afterward, because you're gonna be hanging the cabinets, and then you'll really be able to see if it's truly level whenever you're making them, because sometimes you have to see just how they're hanging to make sure that they look like they're really in line with each other. So my personal recommendation, I don't know if it's what all the industry leaders tell you to do, but it's to wait until you've hung your cabinets and you can really see that they're all level and straight, and then go in with a little template tool to drill the holes for your hardware. I don't think you'll have any problems with that, but if you do, you can always fill it up with a little putty, buff it out, and then just run over it with a little bit of paint again. I had to do that on one place because I just drilled the holes on one cabinet in a completely wrong different space, and so I had to just fill it up, wait for it, buff it out, and then go in again. But you can't even tell that it's there now. So don't worry too much if that happens to you. You can definitely get through it. Okay, I think that is all the tips that I have for you when it comes to painting your own cabinetry at home. I 100% think that you can do it. Like I said, I think the hardest part is sanding. It's just time consuming, and I would just go outside in the lawn, just kind of sit there and just sand away for like an entire day. So if you can enlist some help maybe in that part, that's great. But this is definitely a doable project, and you will save yourself hundreds, if not thousands of dollars doing it yourself. So I 100% say go for it and transform those spaces to look like something that you really love. And this might be the opportunity for you to do like a funky color, because you know that it's not that hard to take on this project. And last recommendation is buy that paint gun because it will definitely help you in the long run, not having to do everything by hand. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. If you did, make sure that you leave a like or a comment, and make sure that you're subscribed to my channel. Every single Tuesday, I come out with a new video on interior design tips, or I take you behind the scenes on projects that I'm doing around the house. And so you don't want to miss a video. I will see you guys next week. Bye. What a wonderful